Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Top-Down Collaboration Leadership Panel Discussion. This webinar is brought to you by Applied Software, the premier software systems integrator in North America. My name is Amy Worthy, and I'm delighted to be your moderator today. Throughout our presentation, we encourage you to take advantage of this fully customizable console. By clicking on the colorful icons on the bottom of your screen, you can minimize, maximize, and resize each of these widgets during the presentation. Starting from left to right, you have the Help widget. Please use this if you need assistance during the webinar. Then you have the Slides widget containing the PowerPoint for today's presentation. The Media Player allows you to control the volume. After that, you have the Q&A widget that allows you to interact with us by typing in questions and comments. Please take a moment to introduce yourself. Also use this box to type in any questions or comments you have throughout the presentation. We'll take time to answer those questions at the end of the webinar. Then you'll see the speaker's bio, so you can learn more about today's presenters. After that is a resource list, so you can access recent BIM 360 design webinars on demand. For other questions and comments, or to request more information, click on the Next widget to send us an email directly from your console. Next, you'll see the Facebook widget, so you can catch up on the latest updates and like our page if you haven't already. And finally, there's a survey widget that will launch at the conclusion of today's webinar. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to you to watch later on. We'll even send you an email with a link to the recording. If you haven't already, search Applied Software on social media. Connect with us to receive the latest information and special offers. Be sure to visit our website, asti.com, for information on services and support, products, training opportunities like CAD learning and live lab learning, and more. For those questions that just can't wait, you can chat with an available representative on our website. You'll find the chat box on the bottom right side of any page of the website. If no one's online to answer your request, we'll receive your chat via email and get back to you as soon as possible. You'll also find a complete schedule of upcoming events, webinars, and trainings on our website calendar. On Thursday, October 18th, we have CAD learning getting started with the basics from 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. If you are new to Applied Software or new to CAD learning, please join us for this webinar so you can learn more about how you can begin using that helpful tool. At the conclusion of today's webinar, a survey will pop up. Complete the survey to be entered into a $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. You must complete the survey to be entered into the drawing. Now you can save on live lab learning courses by attending our webinars. Sign up for a course within 30 days of this webinar and save 25% on the price of the course. You must sign up within 30 days of attending the webinar to receive the discount, but you don't have to take the course within 30 days. You'll receive a 25% off coupon in your follow-up email tomorrow. In the meantime, visit asti.com/livelablearning to learn more and see upcoming courses. And now we'll get started on today's topic, collaboration with our leadership panel. And I think Rick Kramer is going to take over from here.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in today's session on discussing BIM 360 design and basically our top challenges that we've experienced using and also setting up BIM 360 design with hundreds of customers. So without further ado, let me jump right into it. Today's agenda is basically going to be a high-level overview of BIM 360 design. Then we're going to discuss our top challenges between the three of us, between Matt Dillon, John Aid, and myself, as we've experienced it. Then we'll open it up to questions and answers to the audience. This is your time to put in some questions and be able to ask the experts. Then finally, we'll do a review, and let's just get right into it. So let's talk about BIM 360 design and previously how to work in a typical work sharing process. So over here, we have the typical kind of scenario of working in an environment. Let's say Rick Matt and John, all within the architect's office, are working on a live central file. Well, this is great, but the issue comes into play is how to work with an outside engineer. So typically, the different firms would have to then send this file to the engineer or potentially use current tools for trying to share those designs. Those include FTP, shared network drives, or cloud storage, basic cloud storage, such as Dropbox or OneDrive, but they each have their different problems. And most of all, these tools aren't made or built for collaboration. So Autodesk created these different BIM 360 platforms. Starting all the way on the left-hand side, we have the design service, pre-construction, field execution, and handover and operations. These 4 different areas during the different phases of design and construction have different services associated with them. What we're going to be focusing on is the design aspect. Those service offerings from Autodesk include BIM 360 Design, BIM 360 Glue, BIM 360 Build, and BIM 360 Ops, each one targeted to a different audience that is going to be using the design collaboration software. What we're going to be focusing on, again, is the BIM 360 design side, which includes design collaboration using Revit. Also, we have the ability to use Revit Cloud Work Sharing using the desktop connector, document management, which is really new and improved in comparison to its previous version in BIM 360 Team, and old BIM 360 Team for legacy projects that are still using older versions of Revit. Now, let's jump right into what is BIM 360 Design. BIM 360 Design over here on the left-hand side gives the ability for different team members, such as the architect, the structural engineer, and the MEP engineer, all to work collaboratively on a live project. That project is housed on the cloud and accessed anywhere you have an internet connection. Then through Revit, you have the ability to publish. And you publish those captured versions online to document management. This is accessed through the web and typically done through any type of mobile media, such as a Chromebook, your phone, or a tablet. These captured versions of the central file give the ability to designers and owners alike and engineers to look and review and view the drawings online without having to use Revit. Now, without further ado, let's just jump into the top challenges that we've seen. To start off with, let's talk about getting started. So one of the things that I've noticed in trying to set up the BIM 360 design is the ability to really get into it. And one of the features that I've found to really benefit our clients is the Getting Started guide. If you just Google Getting Started with BIM 360 Design, the very first hit you'll see in Google will be this Getting Started guide. This is by Autodesk using their Autodesk Knowledge Network. This document is awesome. So one of the things is using this guide to assist you in getting this. Next, let's talk about the setup. You first must be a site administrator. And then once you're a site administrator, the project setup is pretty straightforward. You enter the project information. You enable services, in this case with design collaboration and document management included in BIM 360 Design. You have the ability to invite administrators. These administrators that you see with an arrow pointing to them have the ability to administrate the project. Over here, you can invite different project members as well as project admins. Next, you have the ability with BIM 360 Design to set up what's called permissions, and we'll touch on that a little bit later on. This is all basically a quick overview of setting it up. Next, another thing that I've come in encounter with is issues or challenges is setting up the desktop connector. It's really essential for using BIM 360 Design along with Revit for those files that might not be a central file. In other words, If a customer is using BIM 360 Design and we invite an engineer and that engineer isn't using BIM 360 Design, the architect, in this case myself, would receive that file, and then via the desktop connector, I can link in these non-central files and thus have it be used by all of the designers. And so that is kind of one of the troubleshooting techniques that I would highly, highly recommend. The desktop connector is going to be key for this to work. Next, another thing is dealing with different versions of Revit. And so the question is, which version of Revit can I use BIM 360 Design? And the answer is all versions, all recent versions of Revit. That includes 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019. All can use the BIM 360 Cloud Collaboration Services. But it all basically boils down to what version of Revit that you're going to be using. If you're using Revit 2018.2 or previous, you use BIM 360 Team and C4R only. If you're using 2018.3, that one actually is sitting on the fence. You can use BIM 360 Team or the newer BIM 360 Design platform. Now, if you're up to date and using Revit 2019, you can only use BIM 360 Design. And by the way, Communicator is not going to be and is no longer available with BIM 360 Design. Even though it'll show up on your computers, you might want to go ahead and uninstall that because it won't be supported anymore with future versions of Revit. But you still can use it with previous versions like 2018. Now, let's talk about the consultants that aren't using BIM 360 Design. Previously, I had mentioned one of the challenges of using BIM 360 Design with consultants that aren't using it. And one tip is to basically use the web interface over here to upload the files. When you upload the files over here, it's basically going to utilize that desktop connector. Now, I'm going to hand it over to one of my colleagues to talk about BIM 360 Design and BIM 360 Docs licensing.
Thanks, Rick. This is John, and one of the things we continually face when discussing BIM 360 Design is those people that want to participate in the project but do not need the full capability of Revit Cloud work sharing. And there's going to be more and more of a demand for that moving forward. And there is a little bit difference between the licensing between BIM 360 Design and BIM 360 Docs. So obviously, somebody who hosts a project, which is what we've just been talking about, would have to activate their account, and then they could create projects and invite people to them. Rick already went through the basics of that. The nice thing about that is as you invite members to a work shared project, a project in BIM 360 Design, those people that you invite outside of your organization, consultants, the owner, any contractor, anybody else who might participate in the project during design, you can require them to get their own license so the burden doesn't fall on, say, you, the architect, or you, whoever is hosting the project. We call that portability, meaning that everybody can bring their own license to the project. That makes it very easy. What gets complicated is if there are other people, say you have principals within your organization, maybe you have project managers who only need to access the files in document management, maybe make markups, create issues, and so on, basically use the document management functionality, but are not going to be working in Revit, are not going to be using the Revit Cloud Collaboration component, then they would only need a BIM 360 Docs license. We bring this up with clients all the time because it is a less expensive license. However, the caveat is if you are inviting people to your project on your account, you have to provide the BIM 360 Docs licenses. So that is basically project-based licensing. It's really account-based licensing, but you basically, anybody you invite to your projects who only requires Docs, document management, and they only need a Docs license, you would have to provide the docs license. So there's flexibility in how you can manage that. In other words, if somebody needs to access your site and you want them to cover it, you either charge them back or they'd have to get a full BIM 360 design seat just to access the document management component. So those are kind of your options. They're somewhat limiting, and from what we know, there might be changes to the licensing in the future, but nothing definitive has been passed by us yet.
Great. Thank you, John. That really goes into a deep detail of the differences of licensing with BIM 360 design and docs, because I have to tell you, I speak to a lot of different customers, and that tends to pop up all the time is how licensing is handled. So thank you. Let's jump into versioning. So over here, we have versioning. So what exactly is versioning? And versioning using BIM 360 design is the ability to have what's called different versions. Online, when you're looking at our file, basically this file ends up being a version of what you have as a central file that gives the ability for an online user to review the documents as well as create backups from them. One of the nice things about this is versioning can be done through Revit using the publish command through the Revit interface. And when you do that, you get a new version. The initial version is version 2, which really confuses a lot of people, but basically it starts in version 2. And every time that you publish through Revit, pushing that version, your users online have the ability to review and mark up and potentially publish your new designs at the end every day to create a new published version. And then you can look at those drawings and even compare older versions. One of the new features that I've just realized, not just realized, but just came across over here was originally you could only publish through Revit, but now you can actually pull through the web. This is awesome because basically you have the ability to upload right over here using this button, the latest, greatest central file, and it pulls it from your central file to the web interface, then giving your team the ability to look at the latest, greatest model and, more importantly, take a look at the different versions. Autodesk gives the ability to have unlimited amount of online backups. So if you end up having a corrupt file, it's critical that you publish at the end of every day your drawings. That way, you have unlimited amount of backups that you can simply go through and pull to make a current backup. All right, next is activation scenarios. Activation scenarios, I think we're going to hand it back over here to John, and John will talk about activation.
So thank you, Rick. One thing we've encountered a lot since BIM 360 Design went live was how to activate it. It can be very simple, and it can you can run into problems. And I would say that these three scenarios really sum up the three basic activation types. So the first one is probably the simplest and the one we like to deal with the most, and it's somebody who is new to BIM 360 Design, meaning they have not been using BIM 360 Team for prior versions of Revit, although we like to think that people have been using Team in collaboration for Revit for a while. But if they haven't and they've just purchased this product, it's a fairly simple process to activate it, to create your account, and begin using it. And there's a web form, and I think we'll look at the next slide to see some of that, but we're going to stay on this slide for just a minute. The next scenario is if you have been using Team, there is a workflow for actually activating if you have an active license or account supporting BIM 360 Team, you can activate your BIM 360 Design account pretty easily from your Autodesk account. That workflow has worked pretty well. That's how we initially set up ours for Applied Software. and usually there's no complication with them. The next scenario is when somebody already has a BIM 360 account. Now, that means an HQ is what they refer to as the account that holds or manages all of your projects, right? That's what you set up when you initially get any BIM 360 product. So the third scenario here is if you've already got some account set up because you had some BIM 360 product, meaning one of the other products like Docs, you could just have Docs and have already set up an account. You might have next generation field, which is called Build or Glue. So anything that would work on top of Docs, and you buy BIM 360 Design, you're effectively adding a service to your existing account. That requires a case be set up with Autodesk and a form filled out to add that service to your existing account. Unfortunately, they don't have that fully automated, so it is a little bit of a manual process, but they can usually fulfill that in about a day. Can you go to the next slide, please? So really, the easy one is you get BIM 360 Design, shows up in your Autodesk account, you hit this link button, and it pulls up the online form, and you fill it out, and you've got a new account. I mean, it's actually pretty easy and flows. Whenever there's any complication in this process and the activation does not go through smoothly, basically it reverts back to that third option. We have to contact Autodesk, and there's usually a form involved, and we have to go that route. So I'd say 9 times out of 10, it works great. And that 10th time, usually there's something that interrupts the process, and we have to revert to the case and filling out a form. And I'm not sure if I have one more slide or not.
Yep, you do. Okay. And I agree totally with John to reiterate, this form is somewhat, can be confusing. And by all means, if there is an issue, feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah, we have an activation guide that's fairly current too, which is nice. But what I mean by current is a lot of these things we have fielded over the month since this was released in April. And this activation guide actually was put together in September. But this is what the form looks like when you do activate it online. It's pretty straightforward, but it does ask you some questions. And if you don't fit a particular rule, you got to go someplace else. Okay, Rick.
And to expand on that, those rules basically within those check marks, you can kind of see here on the slide where next to, for example, the second check mark, it says login here. So if that applies to you in that case, then you just click on that login here instead of filling out the web form. Awesome. Thanks, John. So another thing that we've come across a lot of times is when using BIM 360 Design or any of the services online, you might want to go through, and if you're running into an issue where, let's say yesterday or even earlier today, you were able to access the files and no one can. One of the things that you need to do is go to www.health.autodesk.com. When you go there, this service right here will show you current status of all the online services that Autodesk has. Try to think of each one of these as an independent server. And if it's up and running, you'll have a green check mark. If for whatever reason, any of those servers are running maintenance or they're running slow or there's some degradation of that service, there'll be something other than that check mark. The red box over here shows health subscription. If you click on that, you can actually subscribe to all or any of these services, and you'll get an automatic notification. This is really good because sometimes Autodesk will run maintenance at 2 o'clock in the morning Sunday. So they'll send notifications early and let you know, hey, by the way, the service is going to be down for routine maintenance. So again, make sure to go to health.autodesk.com and click on the health subscription to subscribe to any of these services. Design collaboration, sharing data. Matt, let's see if you talk about that for us.
Sure, and I'm actually going to switch over to this slide first. I think I need to explain the interface before I get into that scary looking flow chart. So one of the major differences, one of them, between BIM 360 design and the earlier generation BIM 360 team is control. So BIM 360 team was what we called a high trust environment, meaning that once someone was invited to a project as a member, if they were a Revit user collaborating on the project, they had full access to everything in that project. There were no other controls besides that. BIM 360 design provides much more control over who has access to what based on any number of criteria, which I'll get into in a minute. And this screen that you're looking at here is the design collaboration window, which kind of speaks to that. And there's some terms that we need to understand. At the top of this screen, we have what are called, let's see if we get the animations going here. There we go. So at the top of the screen, we have what we call swim lanes. And the swim lanes will show each team and what they have done as far as sharing data. So Rick talked about, or John talked about, I think it was Rick talked about setting up teams as part of a project setup. And this is where they come into play. So what you're looking at here is an architecture team, and then the way this is currently configured is showing all of the other teams in a single swim lane. You can actually expand this out and show every team in their own swim lane. The different dots that you see on here indicate activity that each team has done in with their files, and that centers around this term called a package. So part of this sharing workflow, this design collaboration workflow of making data available to other teams is to create a package. And each of those circles that you see on the swim lanes represents a package that team has shared with the rest of the design team. Okay, and so that is actually an activity that you perform. You create a package, then you share that package, and then this is really nice. At that point, you have, as the originator of the data, decided to share that data with other users. So there's the first part of the control. They don't even see it until your team is ready to make it available. And then on the other side, they have the ability to decide when to consume that data or even to consume it at all. So I might be an MEP engineer and I may be looking at what the architect has shared. I might be thinking, you know, I'm really not ready for that yet. I'm not going to consume it yet. So you have control on both sides of that activity. So going back to this workflow, just kind of walk through this from kind of upper left down to lower right and kind of talk about how this design collaboration flows just as an overview. And if anybody needs to see this in more detail, we can pull it up maybe during the question and answer period. But essentially the way it happens is the architect might start off in their file in Revit, and again looking in the upper left corner of this flow chart, and they'll publish that file from Revit, which basically increments in the browser in the BIM 360 design environment to the next version and makes that viewable to everybody that has access to that data. Now, at this point, the only people that really have access to this data using the normal permissions that BIM 360 design uses would be only the people in the architectural team. It hasn't been shared with the other members of the project yet. So if we decide we want to share that data with the other members of the project, and you may not want to. You may want to use that package for something else, just internal reviews or something like that. But if we decide we do want to share it with the rest of the project, then someone in the architectural team will create a package that includes that set of data that's been published, and then they'll share that package, at which point it will show up on their swim lane, and then the other disciplines can decide what to do. So when you share that package, it causes some things to kind of happen in the back end, and some files get copied to different locations where other people can have access to them. So if we move forward a little bit further and look at that third lane down, the structural engineer, there's a couple of ways to consume the data. The structural engineer is choosing to consume it in a more automated mode, less controlled, where they're going to link, for example, the architectural model from a shared folder that's automatically created in BIM 360 design. So when the architect shares the data, their file is automatically copied to this shared folder that the structural engineer has access to, and they can link it directly from there. They don't really have to do anything else in BIM 360 design. problem with that, possibly, is that the next time the architect shares an updated version of that, the updated version copies into that shared folder automatically, and the structural engineer's link will update automatically. They may not be ready for it yet, so that's a choice you have to make. The MEP engineer, that bottom lane, is going to do it a little differently. They will see the package on the swim lane and decide to explore it. They can actually pick the package, look at what's in the contents, and if they decide, yes, we need to use this, they can then consume the package, which actually copies that file to a folder within their team's folder, which they only have access to, and they can link it from there. Bottom line meaning that the next time the architect shares data, the MEP engineer can choose whether or not to update their end or not by simply reconsuming it or not. Okay, so again, the big message here, I know this is kind of a complicated slide, but the big message here is control and on both sides, who has access to your data when, and then when you're receiving the data, do you want to consume it at this point, or do you want to hold off and wait?
Thank you, Matt. And wouldn't you say that this is actually one of the biggest differences between BIM 360 Team and now the new BIM 360 design?
If you had to ask me what the single biggest difference between them is, I would say, at least from a user experience perspective in the design phase, this would be it, because it's more about, again, controlling data, and there's a definite flow to this. It's not hard to learn, but it's definitely more of an interactive type of experience than with BIM 360 Team, where you just dump the files up there and they were there for anybody to use.
And if I can add, I mean, that's all tied perhaps in permission control. So, I mean,
right.
They kind of go hand in hand. This wouldn't work if you didn't have a way of controlling who could have access to what. And just so people know, if they didn't already realize, Team was what we call a high trust environment. Basically, anything you put up there, everybody had access to. You can still set it up that way here. So if you have a high trust environment that you still want, you can bypass this. But this gives you control it in two different flavors, if you will, the way Matt described it.
And if you are going to choose to use the design collaboration workflow the way I've illustrated here, you will be dealing with those permissions. And essentially it boils down to, in order to edit a Revit project, you need to have editor permissions. In order to link a Revit project, you have to have view permissions. Now, there's other permissions as well, but those are the two critical ones. And my experience has been that although you may be tempted to lock things down and really restrict permissions, it's probably better to err more toward the more open environment than to lock things down. And when you set up your project, you have the option of letting BIM 360 Design set the folders and the permissions up for you using the teams that you create. And using those teams, it'll set up a logical folder structure with some default permissions. And usually, if you just go with that, you're starting off fairly good. You may have to make some minor modifications, but nothing major. You can set up your own folder structure and tell your teams to use whichever folders you want and set the permissions up whichever way you want. It's going to cause more work on the front end for project setup, more flexibility, and it may cause a little bit more adjusting to be done as you start working through the project.
Yeah, I'd have to echo with Matt and John in the fact that as a technical support on my end, I've received lots of calls, and the issues that I've seen pretty much across the board is when the permission levels have been set too restrictive and set to just view only, and our customers basically are unable to see the other files because they set the permissions too restrictive. So definitely have a greater trust environment like Matt and John are saying. Awesome. Thanks, Matt. One of the things I'd like to talk about is backups. A lot of times I'll get questions from our customers saying, all right, great, this is a cloud model, but where are our backups? If we don't have the ability to go to our server to get our backups, where exactly are those backups? Well, the backups, as I had mentioned earlier, are located online. every time you publish a new version, either through Revit or pull it through the BIM 360 design interface, it'll create these versions. And the different versions basically will show up here through the web interface. Now, what's really nice is, let's say, for example, a customer, we're working together on a project, and I just happen to corrupt the file, right? So the version 10 over here that you see on the screen is the current version that we're working on as a central file, and none of us can open it. Well, in this case, what I would do as the project manager or team leader, I would open up the web interface and go over here and download the version 9 right below it. I would download it, and it would be now a local file on my computer. If I'm able to open it and it looks fine, then I would basically make it current. But let's say, for argument's sake, that version 9 doesn't work. So that's great. Then I'll go to the next one and next one until I get one that works. In this case, let's say version 7 is the one that works. I downloaded it, I took a look at it, and me and the team agreed this is our latest, greatest one that we have that's non-corrupt. Then online, all I have to do is click on Make Current. When I do that online, it basically takes the versions above it, in this case 8, 9, and 10, and deletes them. And 7 becomes the most current file online as a central file accessed by everyone on the team. That's why it's critical that at the end of the day, we recommend to go ahead and publish, at the end of the day, one person, the latest, greatest file, or go online and retrieve the latest, greatest file so you have backup versions. And again, this is all done via the web.
And if I could just jump in, this goes right back to the whole control thing. You can publish that to a new version. The other teams aren't going to see it until you share it with them. So if you're concerned about, well, I'm not really ready to expose this data to everybody else yet, I'm not sure if I really want to publish that, it's perfectly safe, because until you decide to share it, your team's the only people that see it.
Yep, absolutely. Subscribing to folders. John, you want to take this?
Yeah, and before I move on to that, I'm gonna take a opportunity to talk about an applied software product. There is a demand out there for the ability to kind of automate the backing up of data in the cloud. And if anybody has an interest, we do have a product that helps do that, and it does pull files down and basically synchronize them between Docs and SharePoint and your local file server and a variety of different either cloud or network storage locations. The one thing to keep in mind is that Autodesk still does not allow anyone access to the live models in Revit Cloud work sharing. You can only get access to those published models. So another really important feature is, and when we've had iterations of this through activity and team and so on, but is subscribing to folders. So now you can go to any of the folders that are set up in document management, and you can go to the little ellipsis, and it'll pull up a little menu, and at the bottom of it is subscribe. And when you do select that, it's going to give you a choice of either subscribing to that individual folder or that folder and all its subfolders. So the beautiful thing about that is if anything is added to the folder, anything removed from the folder, or anything in the folder is updated with a new version or replaced with a newer copy, then you will get a notification. And if there's a lot of activity on the project, it will send you not an email for every change, but it'll send you a summary email with all the changes in it.
I really like this feature, John, because it gives me the ability, if I'm working on a project, I don't have to go, oh, you know what, I forgot to send an email to my engineers. I just updated my drawing. I need them to readjust their structural drawings. So I really, for me, I subscribe to all the folders, so I see all the changes.
And Rick, I know I was supposed to talk about document folder setup at some point. I don't know when you wanted me to do that.
Yeah, let's talk about that now, actually.
So, I mean, at least it's showing a little bit of the folders there. So using that same ellipsis button, you can see that you can add a folder Under project files, under any folder that you've created, you can create a tree or a custom folder tree, anything that you want. And the reason we wanted to bring up just talking about setting up folders is that you do have some options. If you you can obviously set up any kind of folder structure you want here under the project, and you can even rename that project files at the top level to be a different name if you want to. Some people do that. Some people like the consistency of plans and project files. But the other thing is that when you do set up design collaboration and you create your teams, design collaboration wants to create a folder that mimics the name of your team, and it likes to put it directly under project files. And I like to make sure that people understand they can create whatever custom folder structure they want and then tell the team what folder to put the files in. So sometimes you may want a folder that's under project files, it's called BIM files, and then maybe under that is where you're going to, or Revit files, and then under that might be where you want the team folders. And maybe the team folders will be a slightly different name than the name of the team you give it yourself. Well, if you set the folder up first, then create your team, you can then browse to and point it to whatever folder you want it to use. So you have a little bit more control that way. So we have seen some pretty complex folder structures, and we've also seen some pretty basic ones. It's really up to you. I wouldn't make it overly complex because you are dealing with permissions on folders too. So I would keep it somewhat straightforward. The other thing, and Rick reminded me of this, is that you can actually, once you set up the project, you can use desktop connector now to create folders from your desktop. So you can create them obviously through the web interface, or you can actually do it through the desktop connector, which is very, very handy.
I love the ability that you can customize those folders, John. That's great. One of the things that I just thinking about it right here while we have this screen up here is a lot of people get confused with plans versus project files. If you're new to BIM 360 design and you're just starting out, a lot of times people are unsure where to put those Revit central files. And they all need to live as a central file under project files, not plans. Plans is where you would send your documents to. And in my opinion, what I've seen a lot of our customers do is the project file location is basically there to work concurrently on a project throughout the entire construction document phase. After you reach a milestone or you're done with 100% CDs, then those files, that Revit file, can be downloaded and then uploaded to the plans area. And the wonderful thing about this is the plans area will extract your sheets, and then your team can start to mark up and look at issues on a different level through plans. And the project files are really just kind of like your living files that the different teams are using. So just something to think about.
If I might, Rick, I mean, plans is really BIM 360's iteration of a plan room. It's intended for what Rick said, when you're ready to release or issue a set of documents, and like he said, that could be during design, like 100% DD or something. But typically it's going to, at minimum, be when you're ready to publish this for, say, construction or permit. You know, you're reaching the finalization of the design phase of the work. But then that can then be used moving forward into construction if somebody's going to use it on the project using BIM 360 Build. So the benefit is that we can start to migrate this stuff moving forward into construction also.
Yep. Awesome. Okay. Key points, some takeaway items over here, and then we're going to open it up to some questions, is why use BIM 360 Design versus other cloud tools? And basically, it just works. Autodesk really thought through and has this tool for Revit users to be able to collaborate on a project file. Time and time again, I get customers that say, Rick, can't we just use Dropbox? And the answer shortly is just no. Dropbox is not made for collaboration, nor is Microsoft OneDrive or any of those other cloud solutions. Really, the BIM 360 design gives you the ability to really keep it all within the Revit environment and continue that workflow. We talked about common troubleshooting tips, and last but not least, we're here to help you. If you have any problems, any questions whatsoever, feel free to reach out to us. Also, we also have pre-recorded sessions on deeper discussions on different things of BIM 360, different service offerings such as BIM 360 Field and also BIM 360 Design. And so you can see some of our pre-recorded sessions. Just reach out to us for any of those if interested. And now, without further ado, we'll open it up to any questions. Let's see, Amy, do we have any questions from the audience?
We do. Someone asked, can you guys help us get started with setting up and using BIM 360 Design?
I'll take that. We certainly can. I mean, we have been helping customers. That's part of our normal support offering. And we're actually going to be rolling out what we call BIM 360 Design White Glove service here very shortly. It'll be a package offering of support as well as training and assistance getting your first few projects set up just to make sure you get up and rolling really quickly. Again, that's soon to come. It's not quite ready to roll out yet, but we are able to help now on an ad hoc basis, on an as-needed basis. Just log a support call like you normally would, and we've got several people on staff now that can assist you with whatever the issue is.
Great. We also had a question on licensing requirements. Is BIM 360 Design license required for each individual user in a single office location or per office location? How does licensing work for a single person remote user?
I'll go ahead and field that one. Somebody had asked that earlier too. Basically, anyone who's going to be working on the project in the cloud concurrently, meaning multiple people working on the project consistently day in, day out, they're going to each need a seat of BIM 360 Design. That's whether they're in the same office, in different offices in the same organization, or it's different consultants in different offices in different firms. Everyone working in it needs their own copy of BIM 360 Design.
All right. And our office only uses AutoCAD to do our projects. Can we use BIM 360 Design?
I'll get that one because I get that a lot. No, unfortunately, you cannot. AutoCAD is not built for central files such as Revit. And so BIM 360 Design is really meant for Revit users. Now, you can use AutoCAD files in the background for informational purposes or underlays, but AutoCAD, nope. You have to stick with, you'll have to go with Revit.
Yeah, if I can just clarify that a little bit. You can certainly put drawing files up there, as Rick said, and use them, link them in to a Revit project using the desktop connector, that type of thing. But as far as having multiple users working in the same DWG file that's hosted in the cloud, no, because AutoCAD itself doesn't really have that kind of work sharing capability.
However, for that clarification.
However, one additional thing to keep in mind is if there are multiple people accessing files for review, BIM 360 Docs is still something to consider because it is a way of centrally locating things, being able to share and allow people to mark up in a central location. So it can still be helpful, but like I said, you can't, two or more people can't work in an AutoCAD file at the same time.
All right, someone else asked, can BIM 360 Design be purchased separately or in a design suite?
Separately. We're hoping that in the future it may be included in the collection or collections, but right now it is a separate purchase. I see another question about, is it licensed monthly, annually, or other? That's a good question. I'd have to look that one up.
Quarterly or annually. I know it's at least annually, but I think you can actually do it monthly or quarterly as well.
We can double check on that. Matter of fact, I might do that really quick. I think it's quarterly and annually and maybe monthly. Oh, there's a question also about, can a consultant get a temporary license for, what is that, a smaller term of time, like 3 months?
3 months.
Let me check real quick. Well, maybe we're answering another question and I'll let you know.
Sure. The next question I see is, can we share a topo surface created on AutoCAD Civil 3D with the Revit team using BIM 360 design?
I'll take that, absolutely. There is an add-on now available for Civil 3D that allows a civil engineer to export a topo surface, not a DWG file, but an actual topo surface that you can then link into your Revit model through BIM 360 design. One of our application engineers on the civil side, Brian Haley, in our Denver office, has been working with that to develop workflows around it. So the short answer is yes.
All right, and I have the answer to the last question. It's monthly or yearly, and there's also a 3-year option. So monthly is more expensive. If you were to do it for a longer period of time, up to a year, it would definitely be more expensive. But if you only need it for a shorter period of time, it can be done monthly.
Awesome.
And I think we've already touched on that when somebody else asked about the licensing and if everyone needs a license. And everyone does need to have their own license. The next question I see is, we're using Revit 2018 on our project, but our consultant is using Revit 2019. Can we both use BIM 360 design?
I'll take that one.
The answer to that one. Okay, go ahead, Rick. Sorry.
No.
Go ahead, Rick.
All right. So I would say yes, you both can use BIM 360 design for each of your projects, but so if I'm working in 2018, BIM 360 design, you have to stay in that version for the entire team. So everyone on my team would be in 2018. If my team is using 2019 for a project, all of us have to be in 2019. You can't mix versions within BIM 360 design, but I guess that might have been a trick question. So both of them, yes, can use BIM 360 design, but you have to use your version for that project, right? Okay.
Do you want me to take the next question?
Sure.
So somebody asked, can you compare team collaboration using Revit Server to BIM 360 design? The technology for BIM 360 design is actually leveraging Revit Server technology, but it's obviously advancing it for cloud use. So Revit Server it was originally created to share teams between different office locations within an organization. Organizations have extended that by using VPN connections to bring in consultants into that. There is inherent weaknesses in that, and that is really latency between different connection speeds with different offices, and that usually is the biggest weakness with Revit Server, plus there's additional cost and setup. People say, well, Revit Server is free, yes, but you have to have a machine running Windows Server in order to install Revit Server on it, and some people don't like to combine that with, say, their file server, print server, and all that. BIM 360 design doesn't require any IT setup on the back end. As long as you've got Revit, you're basically ready to do online collaboration using BIM 360 design. You just have to have an entitlement, be invited to a project, and you're ready to go. So Revit Server is kind of being phased out in place of this, but there are organizations still using it because they've got it set up within their organization, and but they do have to maintain that themselves. I don't know if that answers your question, but if you know anything about Revit Server, it deals with a host server wherever the model is sourced, and then you have what are called acceleration servers in all the remote locations so that people can share to it. So there's many more pieces in between you and the model, whereas with Revit 360 Design, everybody's communicating directly to the model in the cloud.
Yeah, and Revit Server, from my experience, requires a tremendous amount of IT support. And a lot of companies just don't have that type of bandwidth.
All right. I don't see any further questions, and we're almost at 1:30, so we can go ahead and close out of this webinar. But if you think of a question later on, you can email us at events@asti.com. And as Rick mentioned earlier, we have several other webinars that you might benefit from. The 2 recent BIM 360 Design webinars we did last month are available in your console under the resource list. Just click on those links and you'll be able to access that content. In a moment, a survey will pop up. Please complete the survey to be entered into a $25 Amazon gift card giveaway. You must complete the survey to be entered into the drawing. It'll only take a few seconds to complete. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you found this webinar informative and helpful to your business. We look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Thanks.